For the past few days, I've been seeing a lot of reading recommendation videos as a part of people's end of the year reading list, or what they have been reading, or some of the top recommendations for the next year to read. And for me, I was like, cool, let me jump on that real quick. So here is a little video excerpt from my goals video talking about some reading recommendations that I am reading now, or currently will be reading in the future, or already read and am just talking about it already. With all that being said, please enjoy and comment below some of your favorite books that you read this year, or all that other good stuff. Like and subscribe and all that other stuff. So I'll give a couple of reading recommendations, or at least book recommendations, because some of the main books that have actually influenced my creative ability and skills over the last year have been The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I really hope I said his name right. American Gods by Neil Gaiman. The Art of Dramatic Writing by Lajos Aguirre. I hope I said his name right. On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And The Art of Noticing by Rob Walker. A lot of these books have actually just jumped out at me and have been recommended me through either podcast or my college professor's email, because he always had The Count of Monte Cristo in his email for the longest time, and every time I would see it, I would be like, that's an interesting book. I should read that. And I never got around to doing it, but I did about 4 years ago, and then I recently reread it, and it really influenced a lot of how I approach dialogue. And it actually served as the catalyst for a couple of stories that I wrote and am still writing now, that I use that dialogue structure in the way that Dumas actually tells his story in the book. The Count of Monte Cristo is probably the closest book that you can get to an actual video game, because there's so much stuff that happens. There's so many side missions and side quests and MacGuffins and things that actually convince you to move in a certain direction, even though the characters are still in the same place, but then there's another character doing all. It's such a great book. That's why it's number one on the book recommendation list. Highly recommended. American Gods the exact same way. I really don't want to get into that because I'll start spoiling that book, but just know that it really allowed me to reapproach how I did things in regards to storytelling for my own stories. And while I was in Florida, on the way back to Florida, I just decided to keep reading it and keep thinking about how the story was crafted, and it ended up influencing a lot of what I'm writing now. The Art of Dramatic Writing. It's a nice little book about storytelling, and storytelling back in the 1940s for plays and radio shows, but it also helps you develop a couple principles for characters, character motivations, character purposes, I don't know, anyway, and how they interact with the world, which is something that I'm looking at a lot now, but it also gives me a headache because it's hard to look at certain things when you need to do the thing. What I mean by that, you can't make certain character motivations until you start writing the character. And that's kind of what the book tells you to do. It's just that you're focused on the main principles of the book and not the book itself. Or at least maybe that's just me. Maybe I just can't read it properly. On Death and Dying was extremely relevant to me, honestly, because I actually lost a couple of family members this year, and the way that Kubler-Ross actually wrote the book and her position as a death assistant, because that's the only way I can describe her job, it really allowed me to be comforted just a little bit in regards to how the entire process of death and dying actually works, from her perspective at least, and how she portrays everything throughout the book. So weird, but it's awesome. And The Art of Noticing is such a weird book that really helped influence Goal 7, which we'll get to, and you'll notice that I say it a lot and that I refer to it a lot, so I needed to make sure that I said it. Also, I forgot the book for a few minutes while I was shooting this part, so you're gonna notice that. That's the 5 books that I really have kept in my back pocket for the last year, maybe even year and a half, because some of these books I've been reading for a while, and I just either read for the first time or rereading again, because I just needed that boost of creative storytelling that I never would have gotten if I didn't jump into it. There's a massive mix of classical and contemporary work in this little list that I gave you, and I'll link all of this in the description, or at least, do what I can. So, other than all that, that's all I can say. Happy reading.